So Shubham, that my domain thing which you like didn't work earlier. I think
Uh-huh.
it took 24 hours because of that. It was not like allowing.
Oh,
Now it's
so now
working
it's
fine.
working fine, right? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So let's start then. So today we'll discuss about CloudTrail, what AWS CloudTrail is, and then we'll see a very similar service, which is config, AWS config, and then we'll see these are just small topics: AWS Service Health Dashboard and AWS Personal Health Dashboard. So let's start with CloudTrail. Okay, so before we start with CloudTrail, uh, I have a question, and let's see if anybody can answer this. Assume there is a scenario that I join the shift and I see, EC2 instances are gone now. It's not there. I don't see the instances anymore. So looks like maybe either somebody has terminated it or something has happened, and now it's a bad thing, right? So you have to investigate what happened to those EC2 instances. So any idea where we can look at so that we can
CloudWatch logs.
CloudWatch logs.
CloudWatch,
Logs.
CloudWatch logs?
Right. Cloud workloads. Yeah.
Okay, and any other place? Will CloudWatch logs will it tell you that who terminated those instances?
Mm,
Probably not, right?
Right. It
no.
it only gives the information like the time when it got terminated and all stuff.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, maybe because if you try to see the matrices for a specific instance, you would see that till a specific point, at least the graph shows some kind of utilization, and after that the matrices are unavailable, right? So because the instance is not running anymore, so probably CloudWatch is not able to collect any matrices. So you'll have some idea. Okay, so since this particular time onwards, CloudWatch is not able to, you know, not able to see any matrices. So probably at this specific point, something has happened. But if you have to dig deeper, then probably CloudWatch is not the place we can investigate, right? So the answer to this is CloudTrail. If something happens to the instances or something happens to the RDS instances, or and now you want to investigate that what exactly has happened and who has done such a thing, then we can actually go to CloudTrail and see what has happened. Okay, so let me show you how it looks like. Then we can discuss it. So if I search CloudTrail, so CloudTrail is for here we can track user activity and API usage. Okay, so I'll go to CloudTrail and there is something called as event history in CloudTrail. Under event history, I can see what has happened. So event history basically store events that has happened in last 90 days. Okay, so here we can see a lot of events here. So it is Niyati who has terminated some instances, right? On September 24th at around 5:48 p.m. right? So we can also put some filters here. For example, if I want to filter based on a resource type, I can search. So assume the EC2 instances are gone. So we'll put resource type and we can put a filter here EC2 and we can search here AWS colon EC2 colon instance. So this is what I'm looking for. So related to this EC2 instance, the following actions have happened. Okay, so Niyati basically performed one run instances operation. Then she terminated the instances. Then it is me who has modified the instance attribute. Maybe I think I tried to change the instance type from T2 micro to T1 nano, T2 nano, or I have also stopped the instances. Similarly, I can scroll to the bottom. I can see what has happened with respect to EC2 instances. So here under event history, I can see the data for the last 90 days. Okay, I can also filter based on the username that what a particular user has performed in the last 90 days. So if I put a filter here, username, I can search for my user. Uh, Okay, so let's see. I think it is case sensitive, so that is why I could not see it. I try to write like this. So my username is not uppercase S, it's lowercase s. So this is something that we have to remember, that is it is case sensitive. So if I try to search with my username, I can see what I have done. So I can see even this has basically logged this also, that I am doing some lookup events. So this is what we are doing currently, right? So lookup events, blah blah blah, at what time I'm doing what, describe trails. I have done a list buckets operation. At this point I logged into the console, and so this is what the event history is. So event history is a good place to look at if you have to investigate that, if something bad has happened with some AWS resources, you want to find out that what exactly happened and who has done it. So all sort of things we can see under event history, and it will also give you some other activity history, like who has logged in via console at what particular time, and all sort of stuff we can see in event history. It's a good place to look at, but it does not log all kind of activities. And of course the other limitation is that it only holds 90 days of data. So any event that has happened before 90 days, we have no way of accessing that data, that what exactly happened 90 days before. And event history, one important thing is it does not track or record all activities. Mostly what it tracks is any create, modify or delete API calls. And in addition to that, it also logs some other activity types, but it is not very comprehensive, and it does not track every kind of activities. So by default, this is event history is by default enabled for all AWS accounts, and this is free of charge. We don't have to pay anything for event history. But if we want to have a very comprehensive coverage of all kind of API activities, then then what we can do is we can enable a trail in our account. So basically what trail does is it records all API activities, and it also records some other non-API activities, like console login. When somebody tries to sign into an AWS management console, that is not an API activity. So pretty much, if we want a more comprehensive coverage of all the activities, and we want to have better controls over where the logs should go, this event history, we don't know where it is getting stored. We have no we have no no way of uh, we have no way of setting up the retention. So all those things, if we want a fine control over this activity history, we have to enable something called as trail. So we'll see how we can do that. So now let's formally discuss what CloudTrail is. So AWS CloudTrail is a service that enables governance, compliance, operational auditing, and risk auditing of your AWS account. With CloudTrail, you can log, continuously monitor, and retain account activity related to actions across your AWS infrastructure. CloudTrail provides event history for your AWS account activity, including actions taken through AWS Management Console, through AWS SDKs, through command line tools, and other services. This event history simplifies security analysis, resource change tracking, and troubleshooting. So basically, CloudTrail is essentially, it helps you with auditing, right? So basically, who is performing what actions, so that will be recorded via CloudTrail, so that it can be later audited, and that person can be questioned if it is something that he's not supposed to do but he has still done it. So that will be recorded in the CloudTrail logs, and we can ask him that why he has done it. And even sometimes what happens is there will be some external audit that will happen. So at that time, the auditor would actually look at the CloudTrail logs. So any questions so far?
So, Shubham, by for trail you mentioned it simplifies further, right? So, do we have to pay any additional amount for that?
Actually, the first trail that we activate, okay, the first trail that we activate related to management events. So that is free of cost. Of course, see this CloudTrail when we enable, So it delivers the logs to an S3 bucket. So when CloudTrail delivers the logs to an S3 bucket and those logs will be stored in S3, we'll get charged for the S3 because the standard charges that we pay for storing and retrieving data in an S3 bucket, that will still be applicable. But the first trail that we activate in our account for management events, those are free of charge, but any second trail, any third trail that we activate, that will be of charge. And there is something called as management events and data events. So if we are capturing data events also via CloudTrail, then we will get charged for that. We'll discuss what management events are, uh, what data events are, and how to create a trail and how we can specify a bucket. And we will also see that we can optionally configure CloudTrail to deliver logs to CloudWatch logs also. So if you want CloudTrail to deliver the logs to CloudWatch logs also, that can also be done. So of course, then even whatever the standard charges are for CloudWatch logs, that will be applicable. So essentially the first trail that we activate with respect to management events, that is free of charge, Rahim.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. Yeah.
So let's see how we can enable this CloudTrail log. It's quite simple. So event history, it is enabled by default. It records activity history up to 90 days. But if you want to have more comprehensive coverage and also have control over the retention period, then we will have to set up a trail in our account. How do we enable a trail? So we will have to go to trails here, and then we'll say create a trail, and we can give this a name, this trail a name, any name you feel like. So I will say record all activities. So this is the trail name. So here it is asking, where do you want CloudTrail to store the logs? Do you want CloudTrail to create a new bucket, or you want to specify an existing bucket? I'm fine with the new bucket, so it is going to create a bucket for me. And then inside this bucket, it will start putting logs inside it. And here it is asking whether you want to enable encryption on the logs. So it's a good idea. Definitely, it is something that you should do in a production account. Since we haven't discussed formally what KMS is, I will simply say I will disable it. But in a production account, of course, you should encrypt your logs. Okay. So when you say that encrypt the logs, you also have to specify a KMS key. So we haven't covered KMS and how to create a key for encrypting data. So that is why I'm disabling it. But definitely in a production account, you should enable the encryption. So when we say encrypt, so what happens is when CloudTrail basically delivers the log files to S3 bucket, it will be stored encrypted. Okay. So for now, we are just disabling it. And here we have this option of log file validation. So again, for a production account, it is good to enable log file validation. So what it essentially does is, when we say log file validation, when we enable this feature, in addition to the log files that CloudTrail delivers so CloudTrail typically delivers log files every 5 minutes. Okay, so at every 5 minutes of interval, CloudTrail will deliver log files to the S3 bucket. Now, of course, normally you would encrypt this logs, and in addition to encryption, you would also enable log file validation. When we enable this feature, what happens is, in addition to the log files, CloudTrail will deliver something called as digest files. Okay, so every hour it will deliver something called as digest files, and in those digest files there will be a hash for basically in last 1 hour, whatever log files have been delivered by CloudTrail, it will have the hash for those CloudTrail logs. And these digest files can be used to validate whether or not somebody has tampered with the CloudTrail logs. So if we do not enable log file validation, what may happen is it is fine that that you are recording all the activities and CloudTrail is basically delivering the logs into an S3 bucket. But what may happen is somebody may actually tamper those log files, right? He can actually edit those log files, and then he can actually maybe even erase certain activity history. So if you enable log file validation, in addition to the normal log files that it delivers every 5 minutes, every hour it is going to deliver something called as digest files, and these digest files can be used to validate whether the CloudTrail logs have been tampered with or not. So there is a procedure on how to validate CloudTrail logs. So using the digest files, it is possible to validate it and come to a conclusion whether or not it has been tampered with. So this is just to remember how to validate it. It's a whole documentation that can be easily followed. It's not a big thing. So just remember that there is a feature called as log file validation. So normally you would enable it. And what it does is when we enable this, in addition to the regular CloudTrail logs that CloudTrail delivers to an S3 bucket every 5 minutes, in addition to these logs, it will also deliver every hour something called as digest files, and these digest files can be used to validate whether or not these log files have been tampered with. So this is something to remember. If you want to be notified whenever CloudTrail delivers a log, if you want to be notified of it, then you can actually enable SNS notification. So as whenever CloudTrail puts a log file into a S3 bucket, you will be notified of it, right? So here we can see for SNS notification for every log file delivery, choose enabled to be notified each time a log is delivered to your bucket. So I don't want to be bothered by it, so I'm not enabling it. If you want, in addition to the S3 buckets, you want CloudTrail to also deliver the log files to CloudWatch logs, we can actually enable delivery to CloudWatch logs. I'm not doing it, so let's leave it here. And then we have some option to add some key value pairs, just like any AWS resource. You can actually tag your CloudTrail also. So I'm not tagging my trail. I will simply say next. OK. So now we have the option to specify what type of events you want to log. OK. Do you want to log management events, or do you want to log data events also? OK. So normally every organization would enable management events. So what management events are? Management events are pretty much all API activities that you perform in your AWS account. Those API activities could be directly done through AWS Management Console, or through command line, or through AWS SDKs. So any activity that is performed on your AWS account, if you want to track that, you can actually do it by enabling management events. Now, what are data events? You can optionally enable data events also. So what data events are? So data events are typically, high volume activities. So what are high volume activities? Something like, so when we enable data events, you will have, so data events you can enable for three types of resources. One is S3 bucket, one is Lambda functions, and the third is DynamoDB tables. OK, so if you want to record what is happening with your S3 bucket inside the S3 bucket. OK, so if you want to record all S3 get object operations. OK, so if you want to record all S3 get object operations, if you want to record all S3 put object operations, or if you want to record, even S3 delete object operations. So if you want to enable all S3 object level activities also, then you would have to enable data events. OK, and also data events is for Lambda functions also. So if you want to record that, basically who invoked Lambda functions, at what time it was invoked, and things like that. So if you want to track the invocation of Lambda functions also, then you will have to enable data events. And similarly, there is something called as DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL database. So it's a NoSQL database created by AWS, And in DynamoDB, you can create actually something called as tables. So under DynamoDB, you can create tables. And if you want to record table level activities also, like whenever an item is inserted into a table into a DynamoDB table, if you want to track that, if you want to track the, if somebody modifies an item in a DynamoDB table, if you want to track or record that also, then we will enable data events. So data events is essentially for these three services, as I told you, that if you want to record S3 object level activities, the invocation of Lambda functions, and the basically the auditing of DynamoDB tables. If you want to record who is modifying the items inside a DynamoDB table, or whenever an item is inserted into a DynamoDB table, or whenever an item is deleted from a DynamoDB table, if you want to record these activities also, then you can enable data events. So data events are chargeable, okay, are chargeable. So if see, this is the first CloudTrail that we are putting in our AWS account, and we are just choosing management events. If that is the case, it is free. The only thing you'll be charged for is the S3 storage. Eventually it is delivering log files to an S3 bucket. We will have to pay the standard pricing for the S3 bucket, but when it comes to CloudTrail, we do not have to pay anything. But if we enable data events and insight events, then in both the cases we'll be charged. There are additional charges that is applicable. So data events, we have already discussed what data events are. In addition to data events, we can also enable insight events. So if we enable insight events, what happens is this CloudTrail analyzes your activity, and if CloudTrail finds that there is an unusual activity, okay, so it would know, it will take some time to find how your daily activity looks like. And if it finds that there is something off today, if it finds, say for example, that today there is a lot of resource provisioning, there is a massive spike in the resource provisioning, this is not how a typical day looks like for your AWS account. If it observes that suddenly there is a spike in the resource provisioning, a lot of resources are being provisioned, or there is lot of massive operations under IAM, that so then it will basically it will deliver insight events also, and you can actually come to CloudTrail console and see those CloudTrail insights. So CloudTrail insights is for identifying any unusual activity, errors, or user behavior in our account. So if CloudTrail observe that particular user is behaving erratically, this is not how his behavior is. Normally it is a low activity user, but now suddenly CloudTrail observes that this user is doing a lot of resource provisioning. He's doing a lot of things in IAM. So then it is likely that it may be that his user credentials are compromised, and somebody is using his credentials to actually provision a lot of resources, and then who knows what that user is actually doing with those resources. So these are two additional things that can be enabled in CloudTrail. These are chargeable. I'm not doing it, so I'm just enabling management events. I'll show you what options do we see when we enable data events also. So if I check this, here we can see under management events also we have two options. Do you want to record both read and write API activities, or 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 just maybe write activities? So normally people would at least enable write API activities, and read API calls they may ignore, because read API calls typically are not very harmful. So in most cases it will be both, but if not both, at least write API activities you should enable it. So in my case, for management events, I am enabling both read and write API calls. So I want to record both, be it any kind of API call, I want to record those. So if I have checked data events also. So here we see, so here we see three options, right? S3, Lambda, and DynamoDB. So maybe if there are certain S3 buckets that are that are of utmost importance to us. We want to record what activity is happening inside that S3 bucket. Then uh, we can also either we can enable the auditing for all S3 buckets, or for selective S3 buckets it can be done. So here we see that you can choose to log, read and write events for all buckets. You can also choose individual buckets. Okay. So here it says all current and future S3 buckets. I will say no. Okay. I do not want to log data events for all S3 buckets, all current and future S3 buckets. I only want to log events for specific S3 buckets. So in that case, I can actually specify the buckets for which I want to enable uh, this logs. So I can specify those buckets here, and then here additionally I can specify. So here I can specify for which S3 buckets I want to enable auditing. So maybe for these two buckets, maybe these two buckets are important for us. So I will select these two buckets here, and I will say I'm fine with S3 get object calls. If somebody is trying to retrieve an object, I'm fine with it. But if somebody is performing any put object API call, or if somebody is performing a delete object API call, then I want to record that. So in that case, I will select the S3 buckets that I would like to enable auditing for, and then I will select accordingly whatever I feel like. So read and write, so or both. So it's up to you. Similarly, here we can also, for a DynamoDB table also, we can specify for all DynamoDB tables or for selective DynamoDB tables. So accordingly, I can specify the ARN. ARN is what? Amazon resource name, right? Every resource that we create in Amazon would have a unique ARN. So, so here, whatever DynamoDB tables that are very critical, or maybe those are production DynamoDB tables, and we want to be notified, or we want to at least record that, for example, if somebody tomorrow deletes an item from a DynamoDB table, we should have a log that who deleted it. So if that is the case, then we can enable it here. So data events, these are typically high volume activities. So if you enable it, then there will be massive logs that will be delivered depending upon how often you interact with S3 bucket or DynamoDB table. So DynamoDB table is also, it's a NoSQL offering. There can be massive read-write operations to these DynamoDB tables. If you enable data events for such DynamoDB tables, there can be huge logs that will get delivered to your S3 bucket. So from you of course storing it, and then a lot of charges. Anyways, data events, if you want to capture it, there is additional pricing is there. Plus, of course, the storage would also go high. So in our case, I'm unselecting data event, and also I don't want to track any unusual activity. So that is why I'm not selecting this insight events. And then we are good with this. For when it comes to management events, I want to track both read and write API activities. And then I will say next, and then we are good. So create trail. So now we have created a trail here, and you can see it is multi-region trail. Yes, it is a multi-region trail. So even though we are creating this trail in Mumbai region, it will record API activities for all regions. So even if you create a EC2 instance in North Virginia or California, basically it will record those API activities also, because it's a multi-region trail. So from earlier, when we used to create this trail via AWS Management Console, there used to be a button. It used to ask that whether you want to create a multi-region trail or just a regional trail. So we had that option. Looks like they have disabled it. So now whenever you create a trail through AWS Management Console, by default, it will be multi-region trail. If you want to create a trail for a specific region, then you will have to either use AWS command line tools, or you have to use AWS SDKs for creating a region specific trail. So CloudTrail by default delivers log at a 5 minutes interval. So this is a typical frequency. It may happen that it may deliver uh, it won't be precise 5 minutes, but this is just typically it would deliver at 5 minutes frequency, but it is not very precise. And moreover, one more thing is this is not real time. Okay, so any API activity that we perform in our AWS account, it may take up to 15 minutes for that API activity to be recorded in a log file, though the log files are getting delivered at somewhat 5 minutes of frequency. But for an API action to be actually visible in a log file, it may take up to 15 minutes. Okay, so the important part is that this CloudTrail service, it's not real time, though it delivers at a 5 minutes of frequency these log files to an S3 bucket. But for an action to be actually delivered or be recorded in a log file, it may take up to 15 minutes. But yeah, so whenever you perform any API activity, normally you would assume that in next 15 minutes you will see somewhere in the logs. Okay, so now let's navigate to S3 bucket and see how it looks like. So we can see here that this bucket has been created by CloudTrail itself, right? And we can go inside it and let's see how the directory structure looks like. So in the bucket, there is something called as AWS logs. If I go inside it, then we see this folder. What is this? This is our AWS account number. This is a 12-digit number which uniquely identifies an AWS account. So this is our account ID. If I go inside it, I can see CloudTrail Digest and CloudTrail folder. So CloudTrail Digest, inside this folder, you will have digest files using which you can actually validate the integrity of your log files. And inside CloudTrail folder, so as of now, there are no folders inside it. So we'll wait for maybe 5-6 minutes, and then we will see inside this there will be some subfolders, and then inside those subfolders we will see some log files. Okay, so we'll wait for some time. Meanwhile, we'll discuss something else.
So Shubham,
But
I have one.
yes, yes, Nidhi.
So we saw that by default we have the event history, right?
Hmm.
Which is again a cloud trail log, right?
Hmm.
So what is the difference between this and the one which we created? Like,
Okay, so basically this event history is enabled for every customer by default. It is not chargeable, right? But as I told you, in event history, it does not record all API activities. Typically, it records, any create API activities or modify API or delete API activities. In addition to that, it also captures certain API activities, but it's not very comprehensive. It is not going to log all API activities. Okay. And moreover, there is no option for data events. Okay. So that is something that there is no way of configuring it inside event history. This is something that is not configurable at all. We have no control over, we can say that there is no when this log files gets delivered to an S3 bucket, we have better control when it comes to the who can access it, and a lot of other things. Like we can also and the other important part is we know that this event history only holds events up to last 90 days. So any event that has happened, you know uh, that has happened beyond 90 days, so that we will have no record of. And plus it is not comprehensive. As I told you, it does not record all activities, all API actions. So maybe whatever it is, I think somewhere it is documented that what all API activities it records. But the important thing to note here is that a trail that we explicitly create, in that trail we have a lot of, I mean, we have, that is very comprehensive. We can enable, as even for management events we have seen that we have two options, right? Two checkboxes. We can enable read and write, both type of API activities. Plus we have option of enabling data events also. So one important part is the retention, right? So it gets delivered to S3 bucket. Now it's up to you for how long you want to retain those data inside that S3 bucket. Either you can have something like lifecycle rules. So through lifecycle rules also, you can transition the objects or these CloudTrail logs, and then you can eventually either move it to Glacier and something like that. So you have better control of how your CloudTrail is stored and how it is retrieved and accessed. And the retention also, you can choose to retain forever, or you can choose to retain for 6 months or 9 months as per your security policies. And so does it answer your question? So one is retention, one is data
Yeah,
events, and CloudTrail is more comprehensive. Okay, so three
that's
major differences. Okay,
got
so now, yeah, so okay, so this is something that we have already discussed, right? Event history. What event history is? You can troubleshoot operational and security event. You can troubleshoot operational and security incidents over the past 90 days in the CloudTrail console by viewing event history, only limited to create, modify, and delete API calls and certain API activity. So it's not very comprehensive. To get a more comprehensive coverage, uh, we will have to enable a trail explicitly. Okay, and to record all activities including read only activities, data events, management events, a trail needs to be enabled. Typically CloudTrail delivers an event within 15 minutes of the API call, so this is not real time. So whenever an event has happened, whenever somebody has performed an action, that action will be recorded and delivered in next 15 minutes. So we should see that action in a log file typically in next 15 minutes. CloudTrail delivers log files to your S3 bucket approximately every 5 minutes. And CloudTrail does not deliver log files if no API calls are made to your account. If no activity is happening in your account, there's nothing to record. And of course, then the log file will not be delivered in 5 minutes. So that is something which is obvious. Okay. So log file integrity validation, we have already discussed this. So now let's see how the log files looks like. Let's see if the logs are already delivered or not. So what I can do is I'll go to S3 and then I will go inside here. Okay, so this is the folder AWS logs. Inside this, we have account ID. Here we can see CloudTrail Digest and CloudTrail. And here we can see there are 3 folders that have been created. As more activities start to happen in other regions, then we will see more regions here. So basically, uh, for each region there will be a folder, and inside that region, inside that folder, you can go and see what activities have been performed in that specific region. So let's see what we can see in AP South 1. Okay, so inside this folder, this is basically the region code for Asia Pacific Mumbai. We can see year. Inside year, we can see this is for the month, which is September 09. Here we can see this is a date. So currently 24th September. I can go here, and then here we can see it will look like this. So what I can do is I can check, I can click this and I can open it. Okay, so this is how it looks like. I know it's a bit messy, but there are tools to actually decipher this, which can present you in a very visual manner. So here, this is how it's a JSON file. The activities are recorded in a JSON format, and people who are from development background, they are pretty much familiar with JSON. Even it's something very easy to learn how to write a JSON document. I mean, it's totally. I can even show you how a JSON looks like. So, for example, if I want to, if I want to show you about, if, for example, if I want to represent my information, my basic information like my name, my age, my address in a JSON document, how can I do it? It's pretty simple. I can start this curly braces open, curly braces closed. Then what I will do is I will say it's a basically a JSON document is nothing but a key value pair. So for example, if I can say this is what name is a key, right? It's a key. Its value is this Shubham. Okay. Then so each key, after each key there will be a comma. Then I can say here, for example, age. So age is what? So it's a key value pair. So the name of the key is name. Its value is Shubham. Then again, there is another key called age. Its value is what? 28. Then there'll be a comma. I can say address. So inside address, we can have nested also. So we can write something like this. So, so address is a key. Its value is another JSON object. Okay. So here inside it, I can actually, I can have something like, street address. Street address is, say for example, road number 30, road number 13. Then I can put a comma here. Then I can say, for example, area. I can say write something like Powai. Then city is what? Mumbai. So something like this. It's quite easy. You can have nested structure, right? So inside one JSON object, you can have multiple JSON objects. So it's just JSON is nothing but a key value pair. So it basically represents information in a very readable format. It is very easy to parse it. So parse means, parse means the a code can actually run through this document very easily because this is a very defined structure. It is just key value pair. So if somebody has to see what is the value of, say for example, name, so they can easily find out what is the name, what is the age, and something like this. So JSON is very easy to write, so I mean, don't worry about it. So these log files would look something like this. Okay, and there are actually tools to basically which can help you analyze this CloudTrail logs in a more visual way. But one thing that I like is if I download it, I can actually download it, and if I open this in Notepad, it's not something that is very nice. So I have found that actually Mozilla is quite good for reading these JSON files. So I have by default made Mozilla as the basically, if I try to open it, if I show you open with Notepad, so this is quite gibberish. It's not very nice. So if you open it through Mozilla, Mozilla actually can represent it in a very nice format. So that is why I've made Mozilla as the default option using which I can view JSON files. So let's see how it looks like in Mozilla browser. Okay, so this looks nice, right? So here we can see a lot of things. See here you can see uh, so basically here we can see user identity. It is an IAM user. Okay, it is, where is that? Okay, forget about it. As of now, we have not done any explicit operations, right? So when I was setting up the trail, I asked CloudTrail to create a new bucket, right? So when I asked CloudTrail to create a new bucket, it created certain bucket, and it created a bucket policy. It might have applied that bucket policy on my behalf. So though I am asking CloudTrail to do it, but it is done under my user context. So that is why we can see a lot of things here like get bucket ACL and whatnot. So I will show you another example that I did yesterday. So there I actually stopped and started an instance. So that is what was recorded in this CloudTrail. So there are a lot of records here. So 0, you can expand this. So basically I can say expand all. So this is how it looks like. It's quite nice. If I try to search here for stop, okay. So here we can see what has happened is, so this is record 110. Basically, there are several records here, right? So I've expanded all of them. So if I expand this 110, so here we can see the user identity. User identity is an IAM user. It can be an AWS service also, right? Say for example, if you have created a Lambda function and you are using Lambda function to stop an EC2 instance, then in that case, user identity would be the type would be what? The type would be AWS service and not an IAM user, right? Because it is the Lambda service which has actually stopped the instance. So in that case, you would normally see something other than IAM user, because it is not the IAM user who has performed that action. It is an AWS service. So normally here you would see type as AWS service, and under ARN you would see the ARN of the Lambda function which has performed that action. So here in this case we can see the user identity. The type is what? An IAM user. The ARN of the IAM user is this. Okay, this is the AWS account ID. This is our AWS account ID. This is my access key ID. Username is Shubham. Okay. Here we can see additional attributes. MFA authenticated. It is true because I have set up MFA for my user account. So here you can see MFA authenticated true. If you would perform any activity, then you would see here MFA authenticated. It's false because you guys have not set up any MFA device yet. And here we can see event sources. Basically, it is the EC2 service, and then event name is start instances. So what I have done is I have started an EC2 instance. Okay, in which AWS region? It is in Asia Pacific, Mumbai, AP South 1. This is my source IP address. It has also captured this. So basically this is my public IP address of my computer from where I made this API call, right? And then here on which resource I basically performed this action. I performed this action on this specific instance ID. This is the instance ID. And here we can see, okay, here we can see the previous state was stopped. Okay, the previous state was stopped, and when I performed this action, what action? Start instance action. Here we can see the event is basically start instances. So previous state was stopped, and from previous state to current state is what? Pending, right? When instance is in stopped state, when we say start instance, it will go to pending state, and soon after that it goes into running state, right? So here we can see previous state was stopped and the current state is pending. So this is how it records all API activities. So there's nothing much other than this that you have to remember, right? So here we can see, is it a read only action? No, it's not a read only action. Okay. So is it a management event? Yes, it's a management event. It's not a data event. So what are data events? Data events are like, S3 get object, S3 put object, S3 delete object, or DynamoDB insert item, DynamoDB modify item. So all those are data events, right? So this is how it looks like, these CloudTrail logs. So this is it. There's nothing much that we have to learn for CloudTrail. There's more than enough to know about CloudTrail. So any questions? So
No, Shubham.
Kaushik, no?
No,
Okay.
no, Shubham, not till now.
Okay. So now we'll just cover one more, which is called as AWS config, and then we can wrap up early today, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
8:45, we'll try to wrap up by 8:45. Okay.
Okay.
So now let's see what AWS config is. It is very similar to CloudTrail, and sometimes they may also try to confuse you that in what case config would be useful, in what case CloudTrail would be useful. Okay, so let's discuss what config is. So AWS config is a service that enables you to assess, audit, and evaluate the configurations of your AWS resources. Config continuously monitors and records your AWS resource configurations and allows you to automate the evaluation of recorded configurations against desired configurations. With config, you can review changes in configuration and relationships between AWS resources, dive into detailed resource configuration histories, and determine your overall compliance against the configuration specified in your internal guidelines. This enables you to simplify compliance auditing, security analysis, change management, and operational troubleshooting. So what this config is in simple terms, okay? So AWS config, if you enable the recording inside AWS config, it continuously records the configuration of your AWS resources. So it will basically, for example, let's say a security group. So a security group would have some set of inbound rules, some set of outbound rules. So this config, what it does is if you enable the recording inside AWS config, for each AWS resource, it will start recording the configuration. Okay. So at specific point, how the configuration looks like. For example, at 10 a.m., this is how the security group looks like. And it may happen that, the configuration of a specific resource may change over time, right? Say, for example, you created a security group initially and you only allowed maybe HTTP to, you have kept HTTP open to all, but you have only allowed SSH to a specific IP. Maybe as more and more admins get onboarded to the team, you may have to, add more inbound rules to the same security group so that even those admins can actually log in via SSH, right? So configuration of a resource would change over time. So if you want to see, maybe back in some, for example, if you want to see how the configuration has changed over time, okay? So this is where config would come into picture. If you want to see for a specific resource, how the configuration has changed over time, then you would go inside config and you can see there is something called as, basically configuration timeline. You can select a specific resource and you can see the configuration timeline. You would have an idea that, how the configuration has changed over time. Or it is also very useful in case, for example, if somebody says that, I don't know what has happened, but until yesterday I was able to connect to this machine. Now I'm not able to connect to it. So somebody has raised a ticket to you. Okay. So he says that I'm not able to SSH to this machine. So now, and so now basically what we typically ask such users is, since when you are experiencing this issue? So we would say that, until yesterday everything was fine and today onwards it is not working. So what we would do in that case is we can actually quickly go and see what we can quickly go and see. Okay, he would have mentioned to what EC2 instance he is not able to connect. Then we'll go to AWS config. Then we'll see, I mean, basically whatever security group is attached to that EC2 instance, we can go to the configuration timeline. We can see whether somebody has changed the security group. Maybe we can see if there is a change in the security group. So we can see how the security group looked like one day before and how it is looking now. So if somebody has changed, maybe we are not aware, a lot of people work in the shift. So somebody has performed some changes in the security group, but we are not aware of it. So we can quickly go to the security group. We can quickly go to the config, AWS config. We'll select the security group and we'll see how the security group inbound rules looked like one day before and how it is looking now. And if there is any difference, AWS config will highlight that. Okay, so this has changed. So until yesterday, these were the inbound rules. Today, these are the inbound rules, and this is what has changed. So you would easily know that, okay, is there any change that has happened in the security group which is causing this issue? So you'll be able to, identify such issues very easily. So one use case of AWS config is this. So it basically, records the configuration of AWS resources, and and if you want to see how the configuration has changed over time, then you would go to config and see. So they will have something like configuration timeline, and you can see how the configuration looked like over time. So this may help you in troubleshooting uh, certain issues. The other thing is it gives you an inventory. Okay. So normally we create a lot of resources in our AWS account and we tend to forget it, right? So we might have, there are a lot of resources like when we create a VPC, there are a lot of other resources that are associated with VPC, right? So we have VPC, we have subnets, we have route tables, we have internet gateway, we have NAT gateway, we have, there are, a lot of resources are there. Sometimes when we create it, we forget about it. So AWS config also has a feature called as resource inventory, you can go to config and you can see what resources you have. So it will clearly tell you how many instances are running in your account, how many RDS instances are there, how many S3 buckets are there, how many subnets are there, how many VPCs are there. So the other feature of config is it gives you a resource inventory. So you do not have to manually maintain in Excel or somewhere else. It automatically basically maintains it for you. So you would have, you can simply go to config and see at a high level how many resources are there. And from there, you can easily, you can easily identify if at all there are any resources which are simply running. Maybe you simply spinned up an RDS instance, but you forgot to shut it down. So it will give you like how many RDS instances are running. You can drill down and see how many RDS instances are running. And if at all something is running simply idle, we can stop it or terminate it. So the other feature is resource tracking or resource inventory. And the third feature is which is called as automated compliance. Okay, so it can help you, it can help you uh, see, for example, assume one scenario that there are certain guidelines from your company that all AWS resources that are created in your AWS account, those have to adhere to certain guidelines, right? So if any resource is not adhering to that guidelines, then that resource is a non-compliant resource. Okay. So what can be an example? An example could be that assume that, see, normally when we spin up an EC2 instance, for now here in our case, it's a test environment. So we simply start with any base operating system. I mean, the default AMIs that AWS provides. So we simply select AWS AMI and then we basically do whatever we want to do. But normally in an enterprise world, they would first start with a, plain AMI, and then your Linux administrators, those guys may actually do something called as server hardening. So they may harden the operating system. They might configure something called as, firewall Ds. Or so earlier in Linux, I mean, there used to be something called as IP tables. So IP tables is nothing but it's a software firewall. It comes default in Linux systems. Now over time, IP tables, it's still there, but now firewall D is there. So firewall D is a software firewall which comes automatically with Linux. So it's a operating system specific firewall. So sometimes some Linux administrators also configure the firewall D so that, only secured protocols are allowed and whatnot. They may also do some additional configurations inside your operating system. They might install antivirus software like CrowdStrike and whatnot. So what typically these Linux admins, what they might do is they might launch an EC2 instance from a base AMI, and then they may do, install additional softwares. They may configure it in a specific way, and then they would create a custom AMI from that, and then they would instruct all the AWS administrators that do not use the plain AMIs that AWS provides, but instead use this AMI, the custom AMI that we have created. So all EC2 instances going forward should be created from this AMI. Okay. So this is maybe one guideline that your security, maybe whatever security analysts are or people responsible for security, they would have maybe published these guidelines. So now this is one requirement. So all EC2 instances that are currently running, those should be launched from a specific AMI. If an EC2 instance is running or it has been launched from some other AMI and not from the AMI which these guys have created, then it's a non-compliant resource because it is not launched from the AMI that has been specified. So this is one example, right? So in AWS config, you can create something called as rules, and these rules would regularly evaluate the configuration of that resource and see if that resource is compliant or not. So you may create a rule which basically evaluates whether all EC2 instances running are actually running from a specific AMI ID. If somebody has launched an EC2 instance which has not been launched from the specific AMI ID, then AWS config will automatically mark that EC2 instance as non-compliant. So when we go inside config, then we can see how many resources are compliant and how many resources are non-compliant. So it will basically, nobody has to, continuously monitor these things. Config can do it for you. It will highlight if any resources are created which are not as per guidelines. It will mark them as it will mark this as non-compliant, and then you as an administrator can simply, uh, you know, go to that specific resource and make it compliant. Okay. So let's see how we can do it. But at a high level, any questions on what config is?
No, Shubham.
Okay. So let's see in the dashboard how it looks like. So if I go to config, here we can see track resource inventory and changes. So I'll go to config. I'll go to config and then, okay, I think looks like I enabled it. So yesterday. So essentially when you will navigate to this config, there will be a get started page, and then so this is how it looks like. Okay. So under resource inventory, I can see that we have what 36 security groups, we have 19 subnets, we have 17 IAM roles, we have 9 route tables, we have 8 IAM users in our account, we have 8 S3 bucket, and then we have 8 network access control list, we have 5 internet gateways, we have 5 VPCs, and we have 4 IAM policies. Okay, so one feature of config is it provides you a resource inventory. And the other important part that you have to remember about config is a regional service. Okay, so when you enable config in a specific service, it only tracks resources for that specific region. Okay, so it tracks resources for that specific region. Plus you have the option of specifying whether you want to capture changes to global resources. What are global resources? See, IAM resources are global resources, right? That IAM role that we create, that is not specific to any resource, and a user that we create inside IAM, that is not a region specific user. It's just a user, right? So when we enable config, we have the option, right? So normally config is a regional service. It only tracks resources within that specific region, and it will basically continuously record the configuration of AWS resources which are of that region. When we set up config, we optionally have, we can optionally enable this recording of global resources also. So I can show you in some other region. How we can enable config. So let's say let's go to North Virginia. Probably we might have some resources, not much though. So this is one other difference between CloudTrail and config, that it is possible to set up a multi-region trail, right? So normally nowadays, when you set up a trail in your AWS account through AWS Management Console, by default, it is a multi-region trail. So you do not have to go to each region and enable the trail. It in one shot, it can be done. So basically the trail is multi-region by default, but config is not. With config, that is not the case. Okay. So here I'm in North Virginia. I have not enabled AWS config for this specific region. That is why I'm seeing this default page. So AWS config, it record and evaluate configuration for your AWS resources. So let's see how we can do it. We'll simply click on get started. Okay. So here we have this option, record all resources supported in this region, or you want to record specific resource types only. So if you want to enable the recording for specific resource types, like for example, you only want to, for example, you only want to enable, for example, you may have specific resource types only for which you want to enable recording, like EC2 instances, S3 buckets, something like that. then you can specify specific resource types. But normally what people would do is they will record all the resources supported in the region. And here we have the option. Do you want to include global resources as well, right? So example of global resources is IAM resources, right? Like IAM users, roles, and customer managed policies. These are all right global resources. So here I'm enabling config for North Virginia region. I'm saying I want to record all resources supported in this region, which config can monitor and record. In addition to that, I also want to, record global resources like changes to IAM users, role, and IAM policies. And here, just like CloudTrail, even config has to store the configuration somewhere, right? So config continuously record configurations of AWS resources. So it has to store it somewhere. So just like CloudTrail, it also stores the configuration in a bucket. So here we will let config create a bucket on our behalf. So I will say create a bucket. The bucket name is already mentioned here. If you would like to change it, you can change it here. I'm fine with the default bucket name. If you want to be notified of any configuration changes, then you can actually basically stream the changes to an SNS topic and you will be notified. So basically any resource which config is recording, right? If anybody makes a configuration change, you will be notified via SNS. So I don't want to be bothered about such change notification. So I will simply leave it. I will say next. And here we'll skip the rules here for now. I will say next and I'll say confirm. So it is as simple as that. You specify what resource types you want config to record changes for. Then you basically specify whether or not you want to include global resources. Then you have to specify the bucket where AWS config would store the configuration of the resource that it is recording, and then that's pretty much it. So it is quite simple to enable AWS config. So here we can see now we are inside the dashboard, and what it says is your resources are being discovered, right? So it is discovering the resources in this specific region, and in some time we will see how many VPC subnets and S3 buckets we have in this region, and we would see it here. Okay, so while this is being enabled, I will navigate to Asia Pacific Mumbai because most of our resources are in that region. So I will go to Asia Pacific Mumbai. Okay, actually here I thought, so if you want to disable the recording, you can actually come here under settings and you can see recording is off. So yesterday I tried to do some kind of lab before this class. So I did this. So after that I turned off the recording. So let's better we stick to North Virginia only. So let's see in some time we can see here recording is on, right? We just enabled it. Under dashboard we can see how many resources we have in this specific region. It will also show you the global resources like IAM users, IAM roles, and any IAM policies. And here we can see the compliance status, right? So we can see 0 non-compliant rules and 0 non-compliant resources. Okay, so let's see what rules we have. So there are a lot of rules that AWS has created, okay, which can basically help you automate this basically which can help you automate compliance. So they have created a lot of rules for us. Let's see how what are the AWS managed rules. So here we can see the lot of rules are created by AWS. So we do not have to worry about how we can write a code. So lot of rules are created by AWS. In most cases, these rules would be sufficient. Okay, so one such rule I will show you is one such rule that AWS has created for us is restricted SSH. So this rule essentially what it does is it checks whether in any of the security groups you have basically allowed unrestricted SSH access. If in any of the security groups, if you have opened SSH to the world, right? You have not restricted SSH to a specific network address or to a specific IP address. If you have kept open if you have kept open SSH to to the world and it is not restricted at all, then this rule will mark such security groups as non-compliant. Okay, so one is that. So this is the easiest rule to demonstrate. So let's do it. Uh, so let's do it. So here I will select this. So how do we do it is basically we'll go to rules. We'll say add rules. So here, do you want to add an AWS managed rule or do you want to create a custom rule? So if you have some coding capabilities, you can create and write your own custom rules, which does some validations, right? It's totally up to your coding capabilities and creativity. But in most cases, for most of the common use cases, AWS has already created the rules for us. So there are a lot of rules we can see. Um, Say for example, one such simple rule is, for example, in ALB, whether you have enabled redirection from HTTP to HTTPS. Since HTTP is a unsecured protocol, it's a plain text protocol. So any data being exchanged from between the web browser and the load balancer over HTTP, it is plain text, right? So it is possible that somebody might be able to, might be able to sniff the data going between the client computer and the application load balancer. So whenever you create an application load balancer, it is very easy to set up a redirection rule. You can set up that, all incoming HTTP request to the load balancer will be redirected to HTTPS. If you have not enabled such a redirection rule for your application load balancer, then this specific rule will mark any such load balancer where the redirection rule is not enabled. It will highlight those specific application load balancers as non-compliant. Okay, and I have already told you about this SSH rule, right? So this rule, what it does is it basically evaluates whether or not in your security groups you have basically you have kept the SSH inbound rule, whether you have restricted to specific IP addresses or not. If it is not restricted to certain IP addresses, if it is kept open to all, then it will mark such security groups as non-compliant. So let's do it. So I will say add a rule. This is an AWS managed rule. I will say next, and then you can give this a rule a name. So I'm fine with the default name, which is restricted SSH. And we are pretty much fine with it. I'll say next. I will say add rule. So resources are still being discovered. Until then, what we have done is we have basically added a rule. This rule AWS has created for us. So we are using AWS managed rule. We can also write our own custom rules. So of course, to create your own custom rules, it would require some coding capabilities so developers can easily do it. But in most cases, the AWS managed rules are sufficient. So we'll see in some time whenever resource. Okay, so now we can see the resources have been discovered by config. We can see in our case here we have 17 IAM roles, we have 14 subnets, we have 10 security groups, we have 9 route tables, we have VPCs and whatnot. We have one S3 bucket. Okay, I can also see which S3 buckets. If I click here, then it will show me the S3 bucket. So this is the S3 bucket, and this bucket is for storing config data only. So we don't have any other S3 buckets here. So now what I will do is, let's see So in some time, we can see we have 10 compliant resources, right? So looks like none of the security groups allow unrestricted SSH access. So we can see what all compliant resources we have. I can click here and it will load all the resources that are currently compliant. So looks like all the security groups are compliant and none of the security groups have unrestricted SSH access. So let's change one of the security groups and then we'll see in some time that security group will be marked as non-compliant. So you can easily select security group and you can also uh, if I click here, then we have this option to manage resource. I can directly navigate to that resource. No need to go somewhere else. There is an easy link so I can navigate to this security group. So this security group is a custom security group that we have created. This allows SSH from Mumbai VPC. So we will change it. So what I will do is now. Okay, so let's edit the inbound rules. I will make it. I'm allowing SSH from anywhere. Okay. Okay, so let's do it this way. Anywhere IPv4. I will also enable SSH from any IPv6 address. I'll save it. Okay. So hopefully now in some time this config would be able to detect that this particular security group is non-compliant because it allows unrestricted SSH access. Okay. So as of now, we can see this rule is compliant because all the resources are currently in compliant state. And if I go to dashboard, we can see there is a one compliant rule and with respect to this rule, all 10 resources are compliant. In some time, hopefully this config would be able to detect that one of the security groups allow unrestricted SSH access and then it will mark that particular security group as non-compliant. Okay, so far any questions on this?
No, Shubham.
And
No,
okay. And then one thing that I've told you is that it helps you basically it helps you see the configuration timeline, right? So for example, if an EC2 instance currently it is T2 micro, if somebody maybe for example if there is an EC2 instance and somebody has logged a ticket that until yesterday we didn't face any kind of CPU bottleneck. Now suddenly what we see is that there are a lot of CPU load on this machine. So can you check what has happened or is there any change on this particular EC2 instance? Until yesterday everything was fine. Today we see there are a lot of CPU spikes. So one easy thing that you can see is that you can go and see the current instance type. You can go and navigate. You can see what is the current instance type. Maybe you see it is T2 micro, but you don't know whether somebody has downsized it or you don't know how. Maybe yesterday it was a bigger instance, but somebody has downsized it. So so there is no way, no easy way of finding out what was the instance type of this EC2 instance yesterday, because until yesterday it was all fine. So how can you find out what was the instance type yesterday or whether or not somebody has actually changed the instance type? So you can easily come to this config. You can specifically select that resource or that EC2 instance. Then you can go to basically configuration timeline and you can see whether or not there is any configuration change. It will clearly highlight you the difference that yesterday it was like maybe it was x4.large, now it is T2 micro. So now you would know that okay, somebody has downsized it and probably that is the reason they are observing a lot of CPU spikes. So we can try doing it. It is of course unlike, I mean, just like CloudTrail, it is also not real time, so it will take time, but but let's see, hopefully in some time it will detect that. So for now what I'm doing is I'm launching an EC2 instance, then we will try to change the configuration of this EC2 instance. For now I'm launching a t2.micro. In some time I will change the instance type from t2.micro to maybe t2.nano, and then we will see that whether or not config is able to detect, or config is able to detect this configuration change, and in the configuration timeline whether or not we are able to see this configuration change. Okay, so let's launch it. For now this t2 micro is fine, and then anyways any VPC is fine. Add storage. Since it's the default VPC, public IPv4 is automatically enabled, and root volume is fine. And okay, let's give this a name tag. We'll say it's some, maybe it's a WordPress server, whatever. WordPress server. Configure security group. So let's say allow SSH and HTTP only. So I'll allow SSH from my specific IP address, and I'll allow HTTP from anywhere. Review and launch. Launch. I think I would have this. Not sure whether or not I have it, but we really don't need this key pair at this point. So I will simply launch it. Okay, so we'll let this run, and in hopefully in some time it will also add this in under resource inventory. It would detect, that a new resource has been launched, and it will add it in the resource inventory. When we see that it has been added, then we'll try to change the configuration, and then we'll see whether or not we can see this in the configuration timeline. For now, let's try to reload it. Okay, so we can see that there is one non-compliant resource, right? So, and this resource is non-compliant to which rule? It is non-compliant to this restricted SSH rule. Okay, so here we can see that now we can see this rule is non-compliant because there is one resource which is non-compliant, right? So we can see against this rule there is one non-compliant resource. And how to find out which is the non-compliant resource? It's quite easy. We go to dashboard, we simply click on this non-compliant resource, and then we will be able to find out which resource is non-compliant. So it is basically this security group which is non-compliant, right? So I can quickly remediate it. I will go to manage resource and I will change it, and soon enough it will be back to compliant, right? So I'll go to inbound rule. I'll edit the inbound rule, and let's delete this rule, and I will allow SSH only from my IP. You may not specify any IPv4 CIDR for an existing IPv6 CIDR rule. Okay, so let's delete this. I'll add it, and so let's say SSH. So from my IP, I will save the rule. Okay, so now this security group only has one inbound rule, which basically allows SSH from my specific IP address. So we have remediated the non-compliant resource, and hopefully in some time this config would be able to detect that that resource has been made compliant, and this we will see that there will be no non-compliant resources. So similarly, you can explore all other AWS rules that AWS has provided, and pretty much for every use case there are some rule which is already created by AWS. Okay, so now let's read through this. Now it will make more sense to you, right? So AWS config is a service that enables you to assess, audit, and evaluate the configurations of your AWS resources, right? So config continuously monitors and records your AWS resource configuration and allows you to automate the evaluation of recorded configurations against desired configuration. So, so our desired configuration is what? That none of the security groups should allow unrestricted access. This is our desired configuration. And what is the recorded configuration? Recorded configuration would be the current state of the resources. So whatever the configuration is there currently, so that would be recorded by config. And this config basically lets you evaluate the recorded configuration against desired configuration. If it is different than the desired configuration, then it will mark the resource as non-compliant, right? So configuration change history we will see in some time. But meanwhile, let's discuss the last topic, which is status, which is AWS Service Health Dashboard and Personal Health Dashboard. So what is Service Health Dashboard? Okay, so if I go to status.aws.amazon.com, so this is AWS Service Health Dashboard. Okay, so if any of the AWS services are experiencing any problem, right? So the problem could be anything. It's a service failure, or it's a data center outage. So maybe in a specific AWS region, one or two availability zone has gone down. Maybe there is a power failure or a lightning has struck availability zone, and which has caused, you know, which has caused a particular service, which is maybe a particular service is affected somehow. So if any of the AWS service is currently experiencing an outage, or there are some issues observed in an AWS service, it will be published here. Okay, so here we can see they have put it continent wise. So in North America, basically we can see Alexa for Business. This service is operating normally. API Gateway is operating normally. So pretty much for every service, they will publish the current state. If at all any service is not operating normally, if there is any failure or any issues being observed with a particular service, they publish it into this in this service health dashboard. So customers are aware what issues are currently AWS is experiencing at their end. So we can see it in North America. Each service is running fine. We can see pretty much every service is fine. If it is not fine, then they would have basically there would be a maybe a red cross here. Okay. So here you can also see maybe day wise also. But so on September 17th, pretty much every service was fine here. So in the past also you can see whether or not any service had an outage. So all such informations are published to AWS Service Health Dashboard. So this is continent wise in North America, South America, in Asia Pacific, right? So under Asia Pacific, there are a lot of regions, right? Hong Kong, Mumbai. So we can see in Mumbai, Amazon API Gateways is working perfectly fine. So similarly, they publish the status for every service here, and we can see whether or not any service is currently experiencing any outage or failure. So this is service health dashboard. There is something called as personal health dashboard. Okay, so maybe you would not be interested in every AWS service because maybe you are not using all AWS services. None of the customers would use all AWS services because AWS services are just vast, and maybe some big enterprise customers might be using all of them, but a typical customer would not use all of them. So a lot of people would not be interested which particular service is experiencing a problem. Since I'm not using that service, I'm least bothered about the status of that service. So this is for for the entire AWS service. But if you are more interested whether or not is there any service which I am using and which is experiencing a outage, if you are interested in knowing that only, then you can actually use personal health dashboard. Okay, so you can either navigate to personal health dashboard from service health dashboard, or even from here I believe you can easily search personal health dashboard. Okay, personal health dashboard. You can click here and then you will navigate here. Okay, so if there are any open issues, if you are using any service which is experiencing an outage or which is experiencing any kind of failure, you would see here 1 2 or something like that, and that there are two open issues. So maybe something like, there are two services which are currently experiencing a failure or an outage, and it will surface here only if you are using that service. Okay, so you will also see if there are any planned maintenance from AWS side. So if there are any scheduled changes, okay, so they also have to, maintain the underlying hardware. So maybe as part of that maintenance, maybe few of your AWS resources might be affected because of a planned maintenance activity or any scheduled changes. If that is the case, here you would be able to see if there are any scheduled changes that might affect your AWS resources, then you would see under personal health dashboard. So this is what service health dashboard is and personal health dashboard is. So any questions on this?
Yeah, no, Srijan.
No, right? Okay, so now let's see whether this has detected the EC2 instance. Maybe not yet. So here we can see there are no more non-compliant resources because we have already remediated the non-compliant resource. So now this is gone and all 11 comply. Now all 11 security groups are compliant, right? So you can also go to basically detailed. So I can see total resources is 77. If I click here, then I can also do uh, based on specific resource type. Also, I can select my resources. So let's see where is AWS EC2 instance. So it has detected this, right? So if I click here, we can see. So this is there is an EC2 instance which is currently in running state. So let's select a resource type as EC2 instance. So I see it has detected that there is an EC2 instance running in North Virginia region. If I click here, then it will give me other information like what is the instance type and whether or not it is in which state running or stopped, private IP and public IP and things like that. So now let's try to change the instance type. So I will click here and then let's stop it first. We'll stop it. So it is being stopped now. Then I will change the instance type from T2 micro to T2 nano and then I will start it again. And in 5 minutes or so, we should be able to see this configuration change. Okay, this is stopped now and let's downsize it. So we will select this resource. I will go to action and instance settings, change instance type. I will change from T2 micro to T2 nano and I will apply this. And now I will start it. Okay. Okay, so now it is in running state. The instance type is t2.nano. And how do we see that? Of course, this is not real time, same like CloudTrail. So I will show you at least where you can see that timeline. So this resource type is EC2, right? So EC2 instance. You click the resource identifier and then you go to resource timeline, okay? And then, so as of now, it has not detected any configuration change because we just did it. But in some time, we will see that there is a configuration change. And if we expand it, it will show you the configuration has changed from what to what. Before it was like this, and it will show you now it has changed to what configuration. So we will see that in some time. So essentially now you know how to basically check the resource timeline. So simply just go to resource inventory, select that particular resource. You select that resource, go to resource timeline, and in resource timeline, you would see the configuration changes. So if there are 2-3 configuration changes, you would see a number here, and then you can also expand here, and then you can see from what configuration to what configuration it has changed. So we'll wait for 5-6 minutes, and then we'll see whether or not it has detected it. And it is quite readable, and it's easy to understand. So this is pretty much what AWS config is. And CloudTrail we have already discussed. Service health dashboard also we have discussed, and and personal health dashboard is also we have discussed. And okay, so meanwhile, for 5 minutes we'll try to discuss one important thing with CloudWatch. CloudWatch we have seen that what CloudWatch does is, right, in using CloudWatch we can monitor pretty much every AWS resource, right? So in case of maybe in EC2 instances, we can see how much is the CPU utilization, how much network is flowing, how much network traffic that EC2 instance is currently experiencing, how many bytes in and out. So those things, a lot of other things we can monitor. But one important thing is, see, as I already told you that Amazon does not have access to your operating system, right? So whatever matrices they can capture at hypervisor layer. So what is hypervisor? See, normally there is a physical hardware. On top of that, there will be a hypervisor layer. And this hypervisor basically essentially lets you run multiple virtual machine on a single physical hardware, right? So at the hypervisor layer, they will be able to capture certain matrices, but they have no access to your operating system. Okay, because of course, then if they would have access to your operating system, then nobody would trust AWS, right? Because it would be a massive security breach. They would have access to your databases, your application data running inside these EC2 instances. So they have no access to your EC2 instance. And since they do not have access to your EC2 instance, or the specifically the operating system OS, they do not have OS access to your EC2 instances. So that is why by default, using CloudWatch, you will not be able to monitor memory utilization. Okay, you will not be able to monitor disk utilization. So when you do df-h, right, it shows different file systems which are currently mounted, and each file system how much percentage is utilized, right? So by default, using CloudWatch, you cannot monitor memory utilization, you cannot monitor swap usage, you cannot monitor disk utilization. Okay, so if you want you know the ability to monitor these matrices also, basically the OS matrices from CloudWatch, you have to install something called as CloudWatch agent. Okay, so it is very easy to install. So you can you can search here. There's a documentation. AWS has very good documentation on pretty much everything. So if I say install CloudWatch agent on EC2 Linux. So here there is a documentation installing the CloudWatch agent. So basically there is an RPM package that you can download and then you can install it. Okay, in Amazon Linux instance, it is quite easy to do it. In other operating systems like RHEL, SUSE Linux, or other Linux flavors, it is also easy, but it would involve more steps. But pretty much it is quite easy to do it. And when you install the CloudWatch agent, of course, you would also have to associate an IAM role with that EC2 instance, because see, whenever that CloudWatch agent, what CloudWatch agent does is it basically publishes the OS matrices to this CloudWatch, right? But that CloudWatch agent would require permissions or IAM permissions to do so, right? See, CloudWatch agent is putting matrices to CloudWatch, right? And in order to do so, it would require permission, right? And how can you give permission? Either you can hard code the credentials there, you can put the access key ID and secret access key. The other better way of doing it is you create an IAM role, and then in that IAM role you give maybe CloudWatch specific permissions, and then associate that IAM role with that EC2 instance. And once the appropriate IAM role is attached to that EC2 instance and CloudWatch agent is installed and running, then you will be able to monitor OS specific matrices also through CloudWatch. Okay, any doubts on this?
No.
Okay, good. So now let's see in config whether we can see the configuration change. Okay, we are in North Virginia. All resources are compliant. Let's navigate to the resource inventory. Let's navigate to specifically EC2 instance type of resource, and then I will select here, and then let's say resource timeline. So still it has not detected it yet. It will take some more time. So meanwhile, any questions? We are nearing to 8:45. So any questions from Niyati or Salman is there, or he has not joined today?
I think he has joined, but
Maybe he's not.
Yeah, Joe. Actually, I'm traveling between two meetings. Yeah, I'm there.
Ah, okay. It's okay then. You can watch the recording maybe later on.
Yeah.
No question.
Niyati, it's clear, right? It's pretty straightforward
Yeah.
service.
Yeah.
I can understand, these services which are very much developer focused, that would be a bit difficult for you guys to understand it. Even for me, it is a bit tricky to understand it, but I have some coding experience with Python. So I am able to, wrap my head around this to some extent. So if you do not understand this, what SQS is, right? So we didn't do any hands-on on that. Probably even if I would somehow, create a lab around it, but then I mean it would be hard for you to understand it, because how to interpret that code. Anyways, as a solutions architect, you are not expected to understand or how to write code. You should know that there is something called as AWS SDKs, and pretty much for every programming language there are software development kits which AWS has published, and you can basically approach the developer to go through the SDK documentation, and you can ask him to perform certain whatever you feel like. You can guide him. The only thing we should know that where each service comes into picture, in what use case which service would be appropriate. So we, as a solutions architect, you should know when to use SNS, when to use SQS, but how exactly to use SQS, that is not our part, it is the developer's part. He can actually figure it out by reading the documentation, but we should know how we can create decoupled architecture. So things like that, right?
right.
Okay, looks like now we can see it. So under configuration change, if I expand this, okay. So here we can see, okay. So this is from left hand side, 2 is the right hand side, okay. So here we can see the configuration state is stopped to running, okay. So the state has changed from stop to running, and the instance type has changed from T2 micro dot from T2 micro T2 dot micro to T2 dot nano, and Yeah, so pretty much we can see, and we can also see and why this configuration has changed, right? So configuration dot state reason why this configuration has changed, because user initiated shutdown. Okay, so this is how you can see what has changed. So config lets you see the configuration timeline. You can see how it looked like before and how it is now. Okay, so this is what config is. So before we wrap it up, any questions or we are good to close this call?
No, Shubham.
I think
Okay, great.
we'll have to go through the video once. I think even uh, I I will have to go once through the video, and if there is any, we'll catch up in the next call. And
Yeah, sure, of course. Okay then, thanks everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Okay.
Bye.
yeah,
Thanks,
you,
Shubham.
Thank
you
you.
too, Shubham. Have a nice day. Have a nice weekend.